Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's episode, we're going to hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you are interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey everyone, we're here with another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast, and I have my good friend Sarah Weaver. We are going to be talking about all of things real estate investing and funsies because she's just a great person. Now, we met at the FinCon convention, which I talk about a lot with a lot of my guests being friends from FinCon, but we were in a mastermind, and I can tell you I've learned a lot from Sarah in how she creates content, how she does her marketing, and how she's grown her business. So I invited her here to the podcast to not only talk about the things that she does in the real estate investing space and how she makes an impact, but also how she has grown and developed over her journey and what kinds of challenges she's faced, how she's overcome them, and just what kind of an amazing life she's built around her passion. So, Sarah, I just want to welcome you and give you space to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It is so fun to make friends at conferences, but then oftentimes you don't see them for like a whole nother year. And so this is so fun to get to not only catch up with you, but kind of share our stories together. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I always like my audiences to hear these perspectives on finance because they're so related to entrepreneurship. But there's also so many cool financial entrepreneurs who are doing things that make an impact. So it's kind of a neat, like a blending of all of it together, all of the passions that I have and all of the friends and network that I have. So tell us a little bit more about you and who you are and what your business is.
Absolutely. So my name is Sarah Weaver. I'm a real estate coach, a real estate investor, and recently an author. I co-authored the book 30 Day Stay, a real estate investor's guide to mastering the medium term rental. For those not in the real estate space, what the heck does that mean? That means that I wrote a book about one investing strategy. The strategy is very similar to short term rentals, which you've probably been a patron of. You've stayed at an Airbnb or a VRBO, and I specialize in having Airbnbs, but my guests stay for 30 days or longer. So, hence the title of the book, 30 Day Stay. And so, why I love this strategy, we'll dive into. But what's so fun about real estate investing is that heck, it can have so many different arms. So, I think I first started out, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to own some rental property. And that will be my side hustle. That's what I do on the side. And then I'll have a normal job. Well, fast forward 4 years later, and here I am, and now I have 3 small businesses. My passion is real estate investing and travel, and I've been lucky enough to pair the 2 for a really cool company that I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah, I always look at your stuff and I'm like, man, she has a really cool life. Like, and these are the things that when you're a kid, they don't tell you are career options, right? Like, I love how you said it's only been 4 years too, because you have 3 businesses, which is amazing. And also to be able to manage that and have the infrastructure. I know you have a team that supports you. Like you have all these things that I think people who are just starting out it's great for them to see someone who's in that space, who's kind of like in the middle of the journey and you're like scaling up and doing things on a regular basis. And I always love seeing the stuff that you're doing. So let's dig in first to the real estate stuff and we'll save the travel stuff for a little bit later because that's a really, really fun conversation. But with real estate, how did you get started with your very first investment? Like, and even how did you decide that this was going to be the side hustle that you chose, given how many options for possible side hustles exist?
Absolutely. I think for me, I don't have that like profound conversation, like a moment in time. Mine was like, I call it a whisper. So, like, real estate's always been a whisper. Like, my dad worked for new home builders. So, I grew up playing on dirt piles. And you would think that, like, I met a realtor and I was like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. No, that didn't happen. Then I actually was a receptionist at a real estate office when I was in high school. So, again, you would think that was the turning point. Nope. Still, like, about 10 years later is when I finally decided, hey, I think real estate is calling my name. And so it was just kind of a thread throughout my life that I've always been exposed to real estate. But No one in my family is an investor. No one in my family sells real estate. So all of this was kind of new. And so I think what really made me like for sure about this decision was my ability to live anywhere. So I always have had a job, or I should say for a very long time, for the last 8 years, I worked for companies where I could work remotely. And now post COVID, that's commonplace. But in 2015, when I first got that location independent job, that was not normal. And so that gave me the ability to buy a house anywhere in the US. So I was living in Denver, Colorado, and just looking around and being like, man, I can't figure out how I could live in a house, have roommates, and pay my mortgage. Like it's just, I haven't been able to figure out the math. Phew. If I knew then what I know
I
now,
don't know. Yeah, that's a hard one.
kicking myself though, because I mean, of course, I wish I had bought in Denver in 2016. But again, you can't ever have regrets when it comes to things like this because I just didn't know what I know now. But what I did know is that I could buy a house with 3 or 3.5% down. And I just thought, okay, like what's the worst that's going to happen? Is I buy a house, everything breaks. Well, I can tap into my dad's knowledge and hopefully he can fix it or he knows someone. Or if it's a money problem, I'll just sell it. So I have to buy a good property where I could sell it, even if I lost a couple $1,000s or at cost, but I think I'm pretty smart, so I think I'll sell something or I'll buy something where I could essentially flip it. So I had this backup plan of flipping something. Then I had a backup plan that I would just rent it out and have roommates and they'd pay my mortgage. And then my real plan
I
was
like the backup plan for the backup plan.
yeah. I think that that's really important because people always are like, "Oh, isn't investing so scary?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you don't have a plan, investing's scary." But I had all of these different strategies that I thought would work. In hindsight now, I don't do this anymore. I would never buy something that I'm like, "Maybe it's a flip, maybe it's a rental." No. When I buy something now, I'm very sure on the strategy I'm gonna use. But for me at 27, single, making $52,000, I think, is what my tax return said that year. And I just thought, okay, I need something safe. And there's nothing really safe about investing, but I like the tangible asset of real estate more than something I don't understand, like crypto or stocks, bonds, things like that. So I just went full in on real estate.
That's so cool that you didn't even need to have necessarily a ton of experience. I think that's a great lesson for people to think about. What can you learn about something and teach yourself with the right resources to be a pro or to get the questions answered. And yeah, when you're talking about mortgages and purchasing a house, that is super scary. I think when I finally purchased this house, I was making like $80,000 a year, and it took somebody telling me to stop renting
Mhm.
for me to stop renting because I didn't know the benefit of having a house. I saw it more as a liability, and I was really, really, really scared, and I think I was about 30 when I made that choice, and now, like, years later, I'm so bought this house. What I did because at that time, it was the bottom of the market, and then it started to creep up, like, in the summer at the end of the summer in 2010 when I bought this house, I saw the creeping, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I should take advantage of all these programs that didn't exist before." So, I think you, one, have to have the, understanding that you need to have that 3% down and have saved it, and sometimes for people, that's difficult, like, that's a
Well,
first barrier.
well, yeah, at certain purchase prices, that can be a lot of money. I don't want to
Mhm.
pretend real estate investing does not involve money. The cool thing is that my down payment for that first house was $7,000. And so we're not even talking double digits yet. I mean, like we're not even talking about $10,000, $7,000. And because saving money was important to me all throughout my 20s, that didn't feel like a barrier. But you mentioned something that I want to touch on is fear. I was also scared. Like, guys, I'm still scared. And I wrote a book about real estate investing. And so I think that the emotional side of investing doesn't get talked about enough. And so then what do I do when I am scared? Well, I fire up my computer and I run the numbers. And so that's like my very first thing that I recommend to anyone interested in real estate investing is learn how to analyze deals. You don't have to be good at math. I tell people I don't actually like math, I just like money. And so you can learn how to be good at math. And that is like what kept me from being scared. And so I'm so glad to hear that years later, you're glad that you bought that property because I think that's so important.
Yeah, I've actually rented it. So as we were talking about rentals, I was thinking back, I'm like, and even the first time just renting it, well, I wasn't living here for a bit. There's so many lessons I learned in that experience that I would now account for just not having done it. But you never know what you don't know with a new strategy. Like you're saying, you have a strategy for purchasing a particular property. And if it's not your primary residence, that's a great piece of advice because I've also heard people say they use real estate investing to make an impact by improving neighborhoods or improving conditions in neighborhoods, but still keeping things within a reasonable price point for people to live in these houses and to thrive. And so I think there's a lot of ways you can kind of blend your perspectives on, how are you making an impact and what do you want to do with this idea of having a strategy for that particular property. So have you heard of anything like that that people you've worked with have done or anything you've done to kind of support communities?
Absolutely. And trust me, I'm not blind to the idea that real estate investing can be an issue, especially furnished rentals. And so I think the first thing is always act as a human. Like, when we've all had bad landlords, and so the number one thing I try to do is act with kindness and be reasonable. So, for example, when I have a tenant who needs to break their lease, I'm not like, "Oh, you're tough out of luck, you signed a contract." But I find a solution for this person because I've been the person. I've been a tenant that breaks every lease I ever sign because I have something called commitment issues. So I think impact can be on a small level, like that, for example. And then real estate investing can be fantastic for communities. I have a very good friend, Ashley, who's doing a 20 unit development project. The coolest thing is that when she told me this, I was like, "Oh wow, you're a developer." Well, no, she came from finance, so she had never done this before. And I think seeing Ashley, like a woman in her 30s, mother, wife, corporate finance background, take on this new adventure of being a real estate developer, one has shown me just the endless possibilities for us, not only as entrepreneurs, but especially female entrepreneurs. And then she's also focusing on affordability. So taking advantage of opportunities to provide affordable housing in areas that don't have it. She's outside of Seattle, so very expensive city.
There is not a lot of affordability in that market.
Exactly. And then just her brilliance of, like, navigating the system to figure out how can she make it a win-win as an entrepreneur, as a community member, and now it feels like even as a philanthropist. So there's really great opportunities in real estate to be like Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely, and people are doing it, even around I've heard on people buying units and then leasing them to veterans, and just having kind of these micro projects through their experience as real estate developers or real estate, essentially investors. In some cases, they're not even really doing any of the development, they're just investing. And so it's great to hear, your friends, also has a similar idea. That's awesome.
Well, and what I think is really interesting about the world that we live in when we're talking about finance and financial independence is if we can get more people to have financial independence and financial freedom, and it allows them to then work on passion projects or volunteer more, or just essentially have all of their means taken care of so that they can turn around and be better, be a better wife, be a better friend, be a better community member. I mean, imagine if everyone in the United States wasn't worried about putting food on the table, but instead had those basics taken care of and were able to provide more to their community. And I think that that's something really beautiful that I've seen in real estate investing is we have people who have bought enough rental properties where that income from the rent pays their expenses. And now they're like, I don't need to work this dead end job that I don't enjoy. I'm gonna go like, work on my passion project.
Yeah, that's a whole other aspect that I've seen as well too, and one of our other guests in this season, Victor Morgan, was talking about that he has so many other pieces of his portfolio that he's put in place that it allows him to work on his app, and it makes sense because, you have this thing that you're really passionate about that you want to work on, but you don't have to worry about, "Well, where does my everyday money come from?" Yeah, and it's a really interesting thought because people don't get this education in school. Right.
Well, no.
Yeah, I mean, did you learn any of this in school? I definitely did not.
No, none of it. And entrepreneurship is so funny because people are like, "Wow, how did you start a business?" And I was like, "Well, like I had clients and was serving clients way before I had a logo, way before I had a website, before I understood that I needed to like track my expenses and do a good job as a business person. I just wanted to do good by people. And so I saw a problem. I knew that I had the skills to solve it. And next thing I knew, I had served like 30 clients. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess I have a business now.
Maybe I should file something with somebody.
Exactly. Don't worry, guys. I've taken care of all of that.
She's now legit. Yeah, and it has 3 businesses, so I think you're doing pretty good at the learning curve and the corrective action. And so I think that the cool part about your portfolio is it includes not only this real estate piece, but then also you coaching people through the process of understanding the like, how do you become like Sarah? How do you get into this world if you don't know anything? And then you add the book on top of that, and it kind of furthers that reach. So I would like to hear more about, what have you done to grow this part of your business where you're helping people understand how to get into real estate investing and breaking down some of those barriers for folks?
Absolutely. So, my coaching program called the Mentorship serves real estate investors looking to do out of state investing. So, like I mentioned, I lived in Denver, but I bought in Kansas City. I bought in Missouri while I was living in Mexico. I bought in Nebraska while I was living in New Zealand. So you can see I like alliteration and I like traveling. And so I what I first did is I figured out the pivotal point in where everything changed. So I was doing a bunch of things wrong, and then when I tweaked these 4 things, that's when everything changed positively for my real estate portfolio. So when people ask, "How did you do it?" I can actually tell them, "Well, I did this step, this step, this step, and this step." Well, then there's obviously more follow-up question. "Okay, well, how did you do that step 1? And what about step 1 part 4, B?" And so I truly have a program that I help teach people. And then there's this piece of me that truly is a teacher. I got one of my favorite testimonials last week from a one-on-one client, and she said, "Sarah has a heart of a teacher." And I just thought, man, that feels so good to hear because that's how I feel. Like I really love teaching and I really love people. And so being able to show people how I did it, and I'm often like being facetious when I'm saying that like I didn't know anything. Okay, guys, I knew a lot, but I'm trying to really show you that I didn't, study real estate in school. I don't have a finance background. I'm not married to someone in corporate finance. Like I'm just a girl doing all of this by myself. And so surely if you're smart, you can do this too.
And you can find the resources to help you, and I think that that's what coaching does is it shortcuts some of those things for you so that, one of the smart moves you can make is actually investing in the shortcut and having somebody say, "These are steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and step 4B is gonna kinda suck because of this, but just, like, hang in there and do this."
Yeah.
So, I think that that's one of the undervalued perspectives of coaching is that you have to invest in that shortcut to make sure that you're gonna get to the outcome you wanna get to, but maybe a little bit faster
Yeah.
than if you just had gone through the whole journey. And I think that that's a really excellent point about, you give people a comprehensive roadmap to getting through some of those things so that they can be successful. Um, and one of the speaking of kind of like roadmaps and travel, one of the ways you do that is through these amazing looking retreats that I wanted to talk about when we talk about travel. I mean, so we could talk about it from the perspective of you live your life everywhere. But I think first let's do the what are these professional development opportunities that you offer and how do people take part in them? Like what kind of people should be taking part in them? All the juice on that.
Absolutely. So my company Invested Adventures takes real estate investors on epic adventures all over the world. And this came from a place of need. We had a lot of real estate investors, similar to people that go to FinCon. Anyone that like raises their hand and says, I want to live life different. I want to pursue financial independence. Well, whether it be through real estate investing or not, you're raising your hand and you're making yourself different than your peers. And then if all you can think about is crypto or real estate investing or whatever it might be, your friends don't want to hear about it. Like, that friend that's not in real estate investing doesn't care about my cash on cash return or like a win that I had with one of my properties or my tenants. They don't care. They're so sick of hearing about it. And that can feel really isolating. And so the first thing I noticed is that there was a need for community and connectivity. And we met at a conference, and I love conferences. I'm kind of probably a conference junkie. And there's something that's missing at conferences is that like true intimate connectivity, especially for introverts. So as a wild extrovert, I have this really sweet soft spot for introverts. And I realized that we needed a small setting, so like maybe 11 to 15 people to help create real connectivity. And so Invested Adventures was born when I asked about 15 friends if they would be interested in getting together for a retreat. Some of them were just internet friends. I knew them on Instagram, but had never met them in person. And they all said yes. And so Invested Adventures was born. Last year, we did 7 events. Last year, we did 7 events. And this year, we're already doing 7 events January to June. And so clearly I was right. The need is there. People are signing up. But when you talk about impact, this is where I really see the magic happen. I call it the after effect. So you come on this event, you have a great time, we laugh, we cry, we have personal development as you mentioned, and even professional development as a real estate investor. But then something beautiful happens. You stay in touch with these people and Haley buys another property and you get the best kind of FOMO, fear of missing out, and so you go buy another property. And so it's this like beautiful peer pressure that happens amongst the group to make each other better and push each other and hold each other accountable. But then also sometimes they partner with one another. So I have 2 people from an event that are doing a really intensive renovation using a special strategy where you can refinance and get your money out of the deals called the BRRRR strategy. And then a third person from that group is actually their private lender and is lending them money. And so I'm like, wow, I could have never guessed when I first started this adventure that it would be as big as it is. But now we have over 130 people that have attended a Sarah Weaver event. And it's just kind of a magical community.
As someone who wants to start doing retreats and events, I see the magic in it completely. Like, as you talk about it, I'm like, gosh, that sounds so cool. Like, to do that around any topic, it just the opportunity to have people connect and explore new things that couldn't have been created if they hadn't met in that place and had that vulnerability to connect and then be able to like go out of their trusting in a trusting relationship that leads to something further. I think that's really powerful and it's a really excellent transformation point for what you can do by just creating the table, right? Like you're just kind of creating the synergy and the venue for people to come together, but what comes out of it, you have like almost no control or idea.
And it's bigger than I could have ever imagined. So, for example, someone came to my event and realized that they just were not on the right path for their life. And so they went home and they changed everything. They changed their health, they changed their job. I had someone else come to the event and realize that they needed to have a really fierce conversation with their life partner and went home, did it, and was surrounded by all of us virtually and is happier than she's ever been. Someone else came and realized that they weren't happy at their job, had a really, again, fierce conversation with her boss. And now the boss is giving her so much space and freedom because he thinks she's amazing. I think she's amazing. And everyone's happier from it. And so I couldn't measure these types of things that happen from the event. So I've just kind of coined it the after effect. And you just never know what you're going to get when you come to one of my events.
And that's super cool because some of those are personal stories of people's transformation that took place as a result of just being in that environment and community and having that support. So that's really neat. I love that. And I love the idea of an after effect because that kind of means that it's not just at the moment, but there's sort of a sustained transformation that happens after even that'll last into when these people go home from the event. So that's really cool.
Absolutely, and for your
Yeah.
listeners, I should say, like, when I say epic, like, we're seeing lava in Guatemala, hiking volcanoes. We are doing the W Trek down in Chile, Patagonia,
You have
Africa,
a safari
California.
adventure coming on, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So really, really cool adventures.
Yeah, I tell people they always like, if you don't go on safari once in your life, you totally miss something in this lifetime because that is an amazing sight. So everybody must go on safari if you're listening to this. Even if you don't go with Sarah, go on safari. That's key
I'm
message.
so
I
excited.
always
And that's
yeah.
also really important to point out as an entrepreneur is that last year I chose things that I knew I could sell, but this year I chose places that I wanna go to. And everyone's always like, "Oh, it's so cool you get to travel for your job." And it is. I feel so lucky. But I wasn't living like my true authentic self at the very beginning. I was like, "What can I sell?" And now I'm like, "No, what does Sarah want to do?" And I wanna go on an African safari. So we sold out last week, so I'm really excited about that.
Oh, cool. Yay, congratulations. And
Thank
I
you.
think, yeah, absolutely. Doing anything in Africa is amazing. I have spent many an adventure in Africa. So I will always tell people if you invest in an African trip, like depending on what you're planning on seeing, you'll see a lot more. you'll you'll see like the things you didn't bargain on seeing. So, yeah, so it's always really cool. So the other questions I wanted to ask you, like kind of talking about travel, but thinking more about your life, you do live almost, what you would say is a digital nomad life now, quote unquote. People say, oh, you have to kind of have a job to work from anywhere and blah, blah, blah. And we've talked a little bit about that. But what are your what are your top things that you enjoy about this lifestyle that you've built for yourself where you're completely mobile? And what are maybe some challenges that you've had to navigate that people wouldn't really maybe think about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the ability to work remotely since 2015. And then in 2021, I went out on my own to be an entrepreneur. And then to add to that, 4 years is how long I've been fully nomadic. So without a true home base, living out of a suitcase. And man, I mean, that should be my next book because there's so much to dive into. And so the quick and dirty is that the people that you meet is the best part about the whole thing. I've already said how much I love people, having conversations with people from all over the world. That's the number one. That's the best part. And then just you could be salsa dancing on a Tuesday or hiking on a Thursday, and I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't doing that before I became a digital nomad. That was not what my life looked like. My life looked pretty normal, whatever normal is, and then I would go on vacation. Whereas now, sometimes my Wednesday night is like better than some people's vacation. So that is the best part. And then some of the negatives, lack of routine, even for someone like me that doesn't feel like a routine person, has bad effects. So for example, this is like the most unhealthy I've ever been. Um, it's hard to have a meaningful relationship because you're always leaving. You can have great relationships. It's very fun, and meaningful, but not in the same way that you can if they know you're not going to leave in 6 months. So that piece, and then I have friends all over the world. That's a pro. The con is that I can't congregate in one area. So, for those of you that don't follow me on Instagram, I recently had an injury while I was abroad. I didn't just break my arm, I like annihilated my elbow and arm. I broke all the bones in my arm, tore all the ligaments. I now have a prosthetic elbow for the rest of my life. Really did a number on my arm. Well, my health insurance is tied to a rental property that I bought in Omaha. I don't have friends here. So here I am, stuck here because my in-network insurance has my PT schedule here, everything here, and I don't really my crew, my friends are not here. And that's often true anywhere you go in the world is you have to kinda create that community, and again, I already said that meeting people is my favorite part, but then having friends scattered over the world can be kinda nauseating.
I know exactly what you mean because I'm thinking back of all the people I met while traveling, and I'm like, yeah, I've actually would love to be in a face-to-face conversation with that person, but in 20 years, I've never been able to see them again
Yeah.
because, it's great that we can still remain friends online, but wow, those were really amazing opportunities to talk to them and hear from them, but it happened so long ago now. Are they the same person? And so there's so many questions come up of that, of your travel friends that you've met and pet travels past, in years past, and you're like, when am I gonna congregate with all of these people that I met throughout my lifetime? But yeah, you're right. It seems difficult, but with the kind of trade-off is at least you have, the ability to connect to some people maybe in Omaha now and
Well
create
well,
a
also
network there.
well,
Yeah.
also, I think it's this really cool thing. I was listening to a book, it was called Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari, and what really struck me, it's of course about romance, but I took it from a friend angle, is typically these women were marrying people, like, within a 5-mile radius of their home, and so then when you get married, you're, like, friends with other new wives, then when you have kids, you're friends with other new moms, and your friends are all about vicinity. Whereas how cool that you and I live in a world where we can have friends based on our interests, based on our personality, based on our chapter of life. Like, it's gonna be great when I am a new mom and I'm gonna be wanna be friends with new moms. The internet's gonna make it so easy for me to find those people. But right now, I wanna be friends with people that can say yes to a last minute trip to Merida, Mexico, who I happened to meet at FinCon the year before I met you. And the next thing you know, you're in a house working remotely with 8 people you met at FinCon. And like that is the life that I'm so glad I get to live. And so I think it's really important to really point out how fun and beneficial this lifestyle is because you get to make choices that women before us just didn't get to choose.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're talking about, the ability to choose to make that choice, it not only make the choice, but feel like you're confident enough or have the support enough that you're not going to fail in choosing what you want and choosing to follow your passion. And that there is going to be some sort of abundance there waiting for you. And I think that is a lot of social entrepreneurs are really scared to take the initial couple of steps into something that is their own or following their passion because of the uncertainty, right? You don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know that you're gonna be able to end up in Mexico with, like, 8 of your friends working from home. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, who knows if that's even a possibility, right, when you first start out, but then it's great to hear people's journey like yours where you're saying, "No, this is how people are living their lives, and you too can do it." And so I wanted to close with a couple of questions. One, just if you had advice to give to someone who was, in the beginning of their journey where you were when you started, what would be the one piece of advice you would give someone who is looking to, start out with any of the things that you've talked about today that you do?
Yeah.
What would you focus on?
Think for entrepreneurs or wanna be entrepreneurs, I think figuring out what is the problem you're gonna solve and be really, really clear on that, and then go find clients before you have a logo and a website and an LLC and you're stressing about all of the little things. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I meet that are like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna launch that business once I do this," or "I'm gonna do that once I do this." And I'm like, "Why don't you get some money in the bank? Then it could be really fun. You could pay someone to do that logo or that website, but you first need clients to pay you. And how do you get clients? You solve a problem."
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's always a struggle. What problem? Because a lot of us could probably solve multiple problems, right? So which problem to say you solve and now it's a business? But I think you gave really clear examples in the types of businesses that you've built that they solve specific problems and you found specific people who needed that service. And then you could offer what you wanted and people still somehow needed it, which is great.
Absolutely,
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
awesome.
And
And
then for real estate investors, because we
yeah,
talked about real estate investing, my advice would be to, pick a strategy that aligns with your goals. So if you want to be really hands-on, well, then maybe you're gonna do flipping, wholesaling, short-term rentals. If you wanna be less hands-on, maybe you're gonna do medium-term rentals, long-term rentals. If you wanna be completely hands-off, then you should look at being a silent partner, a private lender, or a syndicator. And then from there, you pick a market, you pick an investor friendly agent to find you those deals and write offers. And that's the framework. So if any of that is interesting to you, I'd love to dive deeper into it. But I think that figuring out where you're going is the number one step.
that's really good advice because like you mentioned earlier on, there were so many different strategies you could choose for any one particular property. And I'm sure you're going to buy different properties to fit different strategies. So you really want someone who can explain all of this to you. So that being said, one of the people who can explain all this to you is Miss Sarah Weaver, who's here with us today. And if people wanted to connect to you to get into any of the programs you spoke about, the coaching program, the executive development or leadership development programs and traveling, any of the real estate workshops or anything you're doing, how do people get into your atmosphere, and how do they know, how to connect with you and for what purpose?
Absolutely. I would love it if they visit my website. It's sarahdweaver.com. Or message me on Instagram. If you listen to this episode and you like anything you heard, you didn't like anything you heard, reach out to me. I really do read my DMs, and my Instagram is also Sarah D. Weaver. So sarahdweaver.com or Sarah D. Weaver on Instagram.
Yes, absolutely. And Sarah does read her DMs because I DM her and she answers back. It's like a real person, not a bot. So I'll make sure all of your information is in the show notes in case people want to connect to you. They can go to the website, they can go to Instagram, and then they can go on one of your fantastic trips, which I love. I'm like, maybe I should get into real estate investing just to go on this trip. I'm like, this trip looks
You're
amazing.
you're welcome, Wendy. I'd love to have you.
I know. So never discount me in the future. But anyways, it's been great to have you. Thank you so much for being here with us. And if you want to say goodbye, feel free to, and then we'll head out.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you listening in. I think what you're doing, focusing on impact, is so important. In a world where social media makes it me, 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 me. I love seeing entrepreneurs that are thinking about the we. And so thank you for what you do.
Absolutely. It's all about collective impact and what all of us can do together to elevate. So thanks for being part of the community and being here with us and teaching us all about the wonderful things in your brain. So we appreciate you, hun. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. It's been another episode, and we'll be back with another wonderful interview from another social entrepreneur. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any of the information we spoke about, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking them out and you're clicking on any of the links that seem exciting to you. If you are looking for a coach or a consultant to help you with your social impact or your sustainability, reach out to me via my website, hop on my email list, or jump into one of my programs. All of the links are below. So excited to have you as part of the collective. Make sure that you come back and join us for another episode.